Welcome to the Pinkster Gin Lockdown at Home Gin Tasting. My name is Stephen Marsh and I'm the founder and creator of Pinkster Gin. Now you would have received in your pack 5 miniatures and various other goodies. We're going to taste them in order this evening. We're going to start at the dry end. So we're going to start with the triple juniper. We're going to taste that with the Indian tonic water which you would have received. We're then going to move on to Pinkster Gin itself, which we're also going to try with the Indian tonic water. Then we're going to go on to Pinkster Royale, which is a byproduct of making Pinkster, about which more I will explain later. We're then going to try a delicious cocktail, the Pinkster Gimlet. I'm going to show you how to make that. And that's made with a combination of Pinkster and Royale and a few other ingredients. Really dead easy to make. And then we're going to end at the sweet end with our Hedge Pig Wild Bullets and Quince, which is a gin liqueur, absolutely delicious. And we're going to try that with ginger ale. It would be helpful if you have shot glasses. If you don't have shot glasses, larger glasses will do. I will probably consume a larger glass whilst we're doing all of this, and a wine glass. The other thing I think you're going to need some ice. And you will, and ideally, if you have got some mint, if you have raspberries, it'd be helpful to have some orange and a peeler and perhaps a lime. Now you should have also received in your pack some sachets of gin jam cocktail mix. I'll explain more about them later, and a little jar of gin jam, and that's just to put on your taste. So. Right, before we start tasting, I thought I'd give you a little bit of background about Pinkster Gin, about how I started to make it and why I started to make it, because this really is a hobby that has grown wildly out of control. About sort of 16 years ago, I had some health issues, and you go to your doctor and say you've got a drinking problem, in that you can't. They tend not to take it quite as seriously as you think they should. The 5th doctor I saw identified the problem. I had a problem was yeast and sugar. My body wasn't processing yeast and sugar. Yeast and sugar were hanging around in my stomach and doing what yeast and sugar do when they hang around together, and not making me feel terribly well. And although at that stage I probably hadn't had a drink in 18 months, he told me that if he breathalyzed me there and then, I would probably fail the breathalyzer. I've since seen several cases reported in the papers where long-term teetotalers have failed breathalyzers and got off drink driving charges on medical grounds. There's probably a lot of people wandering around with similar conditions without realizing it. So even better than identifying it and diagnosing the issue, he said he could cure it. Unfortunately, the cure was very boring and just involved cutting yeast and sugar out of my diet. Now, cutting yeast and sugar out of your diet is much easier said than done. It effectively meant a very traditional British diet, meat and 2 veg, nothing interesting, nothing tasty, very, very bland. But it worked. 2 years later, he said, right, we're going to start reintroducing things into your diet. And I was very pleased when he said that we could reintroduce some alcohol. And prior to that, I'd been a wine drinker, but he said you can drink gin or vodka. Having had a bland diet, the last thing I wanted was a bland spirit. And I have to say, I think of vodka as a raw ingredient. It's a neutral grain spirit without the benefits of juniper. So. But I thought gin was fantastic. I really, really liked gin. At that stage I was drinking gin with mineral water because I was still cutting out sugar. I'm still to this day really careful about sugar because I really don't want it all to come back. That I thought gin was lovely, but it doesn't go with food. The defining characteristic of gin is juniper. So vodka, definition of vodka is a pure grain spirit. The definition of gin is a pure grain spirit predominantly flavoured with juniper. Now juniper I think is an absolutely wonderful botanical, but it's very bitter. It doesn't necessarily go with food. So what I was trying to do, what I set out to do, was to find a gin that I could drink all evening. At the time, and it's funny to think of it now, there were only about 20 brands on the market, and none of them actually could I drink with food. So I set out to make one myself. I thought, how hard can this be? The joys of ignorance. It took me about a year before I had a eureka moment, and I discovered that raspberries did something really special with juniper. They just mellow it. They melt. They round the edges. They smooth it, and I then spent another 3.5 years playing around with botanicals to make a clean and refreshing drink gin that I could drink all evening. I had no intention of doing this commercially. This was purely for my own pleasure, and I kept foisting this on everybody who came through the door. And eventually, I realised I got it right because I hadn't changed the recipe in about 3 months, and that's exactly the same recipe we use today. We still make it with fresh raspberries, but I'll tell you more about how we make it, etc. But that's why I started. I was really dragged kicking and screaming into the trade. I had no intention to do this commercially. I had a very busy job in London. I was commuting from Royston, and I was spending all my time on the train to and fro, thinking about botanicals and how it would work. And I was doing all of this in my kitchen. At home, purely for my own consumption. I was eventually persuaded by some friends that I should do it commercially, and I have to say, 7 years later, I can honestly say it's the best thing I've ever done. I've had more fun in the last 7 years than I had in the previous 25. But when I tell you that I was an accountant beforehand, you'll realise that I was starting from a very low base on the fun stakes. So now on to the first of the gins we're going to taste this evening, which is our triple juniper. This is what we make first. This is, and I call it triple juniper because we put 3 times as much juniper in as normal. When I was experimenting all those years ago, trying to get the balance between the raspberries and the juniper right, was really very, very difficult. And because I wanted to be able to taste juniper, but I wanted to mellow the edges. And I wanted to have some taste of the raspberries, but that had to be very subtle. When you're making a gin, generally what you're looking for is subtlety of flavour. You don't want something that's too punchy, too in your face, because actually they've all got to work together. I wanted something clean and refreshing that I could drink all evening. So now what we're going to do. If you take the triple juniper and put a little bit in the glass. Now don't knock it all back in one go, because actually what we're going to do is we're going to build up to a mini gin and tonic with this. So what I want you to do first of all is to sniff it. Now when you do that, you should get quite a lot of juniper on the nose. Then I want you to sip it. Push it around your mouth. You will get a lot of juniper, because there is a lot of juniper in that. And that's entirely deliberate. Now, actually, we don't sell this. We don't sell this on its own. We make this. And then we do a secondary maceration and make Pinkster with it. So you'll be amongst the first people who have tasted this on its own. So having done that, the next thing to do is to get some ice and put some ice in your glass. Now it may sound trite for me to say that there are 2 things that the ice does. The first is obviously that it reduces the temperature of the liquid. And that is important, but not nearly as important as the fact that actually it dilutes the gin. When you taste gin professionally, you taste it 50-50 water. I have to say that I much prefer to taste gin like this. I like to taste it neat. I like to then add ice. I want the ice to melt a little, and we'll spare you the science lesson, but something happens on a molecular basis. It opens up. So if you put your your hand around the glass. That should warm it up slightly. You want it to melt a little bit. You want it to dilute the gin. So when it's done that, then have another sip. And it's not such a strong juniper hit this time. There are other flavours in there. I'm not going to name them because actually I've never told anybody about the botanicals we use to make Pinkster, other than juniper and raspberries. There are 8 botanicals in total. There are 5 botanicals in triple juniper, and I'm not going to tell you what the others are. One of them is quite easy to taste. The other 3 are not. I have to say, it makes a fantastic martini, but that is a very, very good dry gin, traditional gin. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some tonic water to it. So just a dash, don't drown it. You may need, of course, to have to top up your glass from the original, because you may well have drunk it by now. Anyway, then try it again. And it's a very, very dry gin and tonic. As I say, we do drink a lot of this at home. I think it's a really, really nice dry gin. Now at home we garnish with a wedge of orange. So if you can see there, little wedge. Actually quite a big wedge for such a small glass. But the orange really complements the juniper. I think it's a smashing drink. No, we don't normally sell it. We haven't traditionally sold it. We have had lots of people asking for it, and so we have started selling it. And we have. Let's open this up. There it is in the bottle. It's in a reused empty Pinkster bottle with a homemade label. So if you'd like some, just contact us via our website, and I'm sure we can sell you some. So now we're going to move on to tasting Pinkster next. So for that you will need the little miniature Pinkster, some mint, some ice, shot glass, and the Indian Fever Tree tonic. Hi, we're now going to move on to Pinkster gin itself. The triple juniper, which you've already described, is what we distill first of all, and then we do a secondary maceration with fresh raspberries and 2 other botanicals. And all those raspberries are grown about 5 miles away from our base in Newton, just outside Cambridge, and they're picked in the morning and they're in our tanks in the afternoon. We only use fresh raspberries. We don't use flavourings. We don't use freeze-dried raspberries or frozen raspberries. It's only really fresh raspberries that do it. And when I started doing this commercially, when I was persuaded, I was dragged kicking and screaming to do this commercially. Everybody in the trade told me I couldn't possibly work with wet fruit without adding sugar. We don't add sugar. But that was how I had been making it in my kitchen for 7 or 8 years, and that was how I thought we should continue to do it. And frankly, I think it works. So what we're going to do, as before, we're going to taste this. We're going to taste this neat. So if you put a dash of the Pinkster into your glass, and exactly as before, you have a sniff of it. Now, I'm getting a lot of raspberry on the nose. I'm getting some sweetness, and any sugar comes from the raspberries. As I said earlier, we don't add any sugar. Any sugar in Pinkster comes from raspberries. There's less than a gram of sugar in a whole bottle of Pinkster. 0.77 of a gram of sugar, and that is natural sugar from the raspberries. There's quite a lot of raspberries. So have a sniff of it. I'm getting a little bit of juniper too, but it's really mostly raspberries, and raspberries I think on the nose are predominant. I'm then going to have a sip of it, and don't take a huge amount in one go. Let it sit on your tongue, swirl it around your mouth, and then getting quite a lot of juniper. Juniper is still, I think, when tasted like that, I think juniper is still predominant. Then you get the juniper first, then you get the raspberry, and you get what in the trade is known as very nice mouthfeel. There's quite a long tail to it. It's very, very pleasant. Now, if you've got very, very good taste buds, you might be picking up some pepper notes, but you should get successive waves of raspberry and alternating with juniper. It's very, very smooth. It's actually a surprisingly dry. It's a surprisingly dry gin. We're often categorised. We're always categorised as a flavoured gin, and I think people expect us to be a lot sweeter because we've got colour, and the colour comes from the raspberries. People expect us to be a lot sweeter than we actually are. Actually, that's a very, very dry gin. I prefer to think of us as a dry gin with colour and with flavour, as opposed to a flavoured gin. But that's as maybe. So now, having done that, as before, so you're getting the drift of this. What we're going to do is put an ice cube, some ice in your glass. Let it melt a little. I want it diluted. In fact, if you hold it up, you can actually see. You can see it diluting. You can see it doing its business, and then have another taste. And it opens up again. It opens up. I'm actually getting more juniper, and then raspberries, and and juniper again. And actually I'm picking up a few more flavors as well. I'm not going to say what they are because I'm not going to reveal the other botanicals. But I'm then getting more pepper notes, and most people should be getting pepper notes on this one at this point, and on the nose, it's not quite as raspberryish on the nose, but it is very different to drinking it neat when you drink it with ice. So then, as before, what we're going to do is add a bit of tonic. And sip it. Do you want to drown it with tonic? I personally prefer to drink gin and tonic on a ratio of 1:2, 1 part gin, 2 parts tonic, and possibly 1:3 or 1:4, but certainly no more than 1:4. So these purposes, you don't want to drown it with tonic. Again, it becomes a very different drink. I think it does what I wanted it to do, and that is I wanted something really clean and refreshing. I wanted to be able to taste juniper, but I wanted to be able to drink it with food, and that does it. So now then, to garnish this, the rule about garnishes. I've got some raspberries here. I can garnish that with a raspberry. You might not have much left in your glass by now. The idea is that a garnish that is submerged is really there for aesthetics. Adding a raspberry to your glass at this stage is not going to impact the flavour in any way, shape or form. However, a traditional culinary pairing with raspberry is actually mint. So if you take a sprig of mint, and this I'm going to show you the mint trick. So you take a sprig of mint, tear a leaf off, tear a leaf in two, pinch your nose, put the mint leaf in your mouth and chew it. And then unpinch your nose. Now it's only when you unpinch your nose that you will taste the mint. And that is because the taste receptors for mint are olfactory rather than throat-based. Which is why when we come to use this as a garnish, what we do is we bruise it. Technically, the technical term for bruising mint is spanking the mint. I would have paid an agency a lot of money to come up with that. There's nothing the British public like more than a good double entendre, but the technical term is actually spanking the mint. And then what you do, having spanked the mint, you place it on the surface of your glass. Now, the general rule is, as I said, that a garnish that is submerged is there for aesthetics, but a garnish that's on the surface is there for aroma, and it's the aroma that is going to enhance the taste experience. So then when you raise the glass to your lips, you should be able to smell mint, and the mint and the raspberry just work so well together. So and it also looks very good, but that's why we talk about spanking the mint. I've even been on the BBC talking about spanking the mint. My mother was so proud. I think that works really well. Now when we finish making Pinkster, we're left with the raspberries. We put them in jars and sell them as boozy berries. Some of the boozy berries we turn into jam. Some of the jam we then turn into gin jam cocktails, cocktail mixes, and we have Pinkster Royale, which we're going to come on to in a second. I have to say, Pinkster is makes some fantastic cocktails. We're going to try gimlet later. Makes a really good martini. I particularly like martinis. The only trouble is that most people don't have vermouth that's in date. People think it's a spirit when it's actually a wine, so it's always off. So unless you're going to a bar that does a lot of them and where the ingredients are going to be okay. I tend to use elderflower cordial or even our elderflower gin liqueur under the Hedge Pig range, and that's absolutely delicious. So you have to be very careful with martinis. Dorothy Park had a great line about martinis. I love a martini, 2 at the most, 3 and I'm under the table, 4 and I'm under the host. So treat martinis with caution. But we'll come on to cocktails later. We're now going to try the Pinkster Royale. So the Royale, as you can see, it's an intense red flavour, very, very deep red flavour. And we make it basically when we drain the tanks of Pinkster, we're left with the raspberries, and the raspberries come out of the tanks dry, and we take them out of the tanks and put them into 25-litre food grade buckets and leave them. The next morning we come in, and there's a liquid line around the raspberries, around the buckets, and that is Pinkster Royale. It's a combination of gin and raspberry juice. The raspberries just release their contents, and we then use that liquid to preserve the raspberries until we're ready to do something with them. So, and you can see it in the boozy berries. However, when we make the jam, we don't need the liquid. And by which time they've probably sat around for some time together, and that liquid is what we then use for Pinkster Royale. So if you open the, it's a byproduct of a byproduct effectively. We have no waste at Pinkster, no waste. So if you take the Royale, pour some into your glass, and again have a sniff. Now, intensely raspberry, really, really strong raspberry notes. Very strong on the nose. And then if you have a sip, very, very strong, but very dry raspberry flavour. You're not gonna get very much juniper on this. This is very predominantly raspberry. For that reason, we don't call it a gin. It's only 24%, so it's below proof for gin. It's not a liqueur because we don't add sugar. Technically, it's an other spirit, but actually, it's an incredibly versatile, incredibly versatile drink. If you pour a decent dash of that into a glass of prosecco, it'll completely transform it. The intense raspberry notes of the Pinxter Royale work really well with the pear notes of prosecco, I have to say, I quite often drink this on the rocks. I'm going to put, as before, I'm going to put some ice in. If I want a slightly lower ABV drink in the evening, something a hot evening, this on the rocks with some with a little dash of sparkling water, very, very refreshing, absolutely delicious. Yeah, it's very good. It's also a very, very good cocktail ingredient. It's very versatile, and we really like it. But as I say, there is no waste. Now, one of the cocktails that we use it in is actually the Pinxter Gimlet, and we're going to move on to that next. Now, the Gimlet is one of my favourite cocktails. We drink bucket loads of it at home. It's so easy to make, absolutely delicious. So you've got your little gimlet bottle. Give it a bit of a shake because the ingredients might have separated a little bit, but give it a shake, and then pour it into your glass. Now I'm going to be terribly greedy because I'm very partial to this. I'm actually going to pour it into a wine glass filled with ice, and then I'm going to garnish it with a wedge of lime. And I have to say, I really like it. So you taste it. Now I will most of the time I will also dilute this slightly with add a dash of sparkling water. But for tasting purposes, I'm not going to do that. I've got the ice in there. The reason I fill the wine glass with ice because actually I want the ice to dilute it a little bit. But actually, it's a really, really delicious cocktail. Now I'm going to show you how to make this. So what we do, we start with Pinxter, and I'm going to take from here. So this is. The recipe for this will appear on the screen after this, but into an empty Pinxter bottle, I'm going to put 100 ml. And this is the ratio. It's 2 parts. It's basically 2 parts Pinxter. So that's 100 ml of Pinxter. And I'm going to then add half a part of Pinxter Royale, so 25 ml of Pinxter Royale. I told you it was good in cocktails. And then I'm going to take some pure pour lime, easy to get. Don't get lime cordial. You want pure pour lime. This one comes from Funkin, absolutely superb. Keep it in the fridge. And I'm going to put 50 ml, so 1 part pure pour lime, and 1 part of sugar syrup. Again, from Funkin, easy to make yourself, but equally easy to buy in the shops. I tend to put slightly less sugar syrup than lime juice, but it's approximately one part. And then I put the lid on the bottle and just do that. Now that really couldn't be simpler. It's also incredibly easy to pre-batch. We serve this often at parties. We get through bucket loads of it. There's nothing worse. I mean, people like having cocktails, but there's nothing worse if you're having a party and you're having to make loads of cocktails. Much better, it's something you can pre-batch and then just pour. I hope that when you taste what you've got in your glass, you'll agree that it's very drinkable, particularly on a hot summer day. Though I have to say we drink it all year round. I think it's absolutely marvellous. As you see, really easy to make, easy to pre-batch. And we even sell it actually in, we sell gimlet packs. And I think very soon we're going to be producing pre-batch Pinkster gimlets and selling them by the bottle. Really delicious. The reason we garnish with a lime is obviously it's got lime in it. Works really well. Enjoy. Now we're going to move on to the sweetest element of it. This we do add sugar to. It's the only we only add sugar to the hedge pig range, which is a range of fruit gin liqueurs. What we're going to be trying is our wild bullace and quince. I think it's, again, absolutely delicious. So what we're going to do is we're going to try it neat. So pour a dash in your glass and have a sniff. Now you should get some honey notes on the nose. You should be getting some quince and possibly some plum notes too. And then when you taste it, sort of honey on the tongue, really interesting combination of flavours. There's quite a lot of quince. There's subtle plum notes. The combination, I think, is really drinkable. Now, we make this out of quince, most of which is grown locally to us in East Anglia, and wild bullace. Now, most people know what quince is. It's a member of the apple family. Absolute a nightmare to work with. Very tough to cut, etc. And it's great. It makes membrillo, goes extremely well with cheese. Wild bullace is a hedgerow plum. They were very popular in the 19th century. They grow across East Anglia and in other parts of the UK. They went completely out of favour in the First World War, and what is left in the UK, in the British countryside, is really a hangover from 19th century. I'm busy propagating and planting orchards of it. I think it's absolutely marvellous, and in particular, I think it's marvellous when paired with quince. I wish I could get more of it. We're fairly limited in what we can produce of this at the moment. In a couple of years' time, we'll be able to produce it in larger quantity, but at the moment, it's relatively limited. We produce a couple of thousand bottles a year. Absolutely delicious. Very good with cheese. As you would expect, given that it's got quite a lot of quince in it. It's very smooth. Now, not only is it really good to drink neat, and in fact all of our hedge pig range we describe as pudding gins. I'm a big fan. If you told somebody when to drink something, they probably will. So really nice with really drinkable with puddings. This goes particularly well with cheese, as does Cambridge Gauge, which we also do. But this also makes an exceptionally good long drink. Now I'm going to add a little bit more to that, and I'm going to add some ice. And some ginger ale. I wouldn't. Again, I do one part wild bullace and quince to 2 parts ginger ale. I think it's an absolutely delicious long drink, and then we garnish that with some orange peel. And in fact, the thing with orange peel is to twist it, because what you want is the pores on the skin of the orange, where a lot of the essential oils from the orange are in the skin. So you twist it to try and release them and put in. So it looks fantastic. People who like whiskey, and there are and the people who don't like gin absolutely do, really like this. Particularly, and people who like whiskey really like this too. I think it makes a fantastic drink. We drink it all year round. And I wish that I could make a lot more of it. So I hope you like that. I hope you like everything you've tried and that we've shown you. Everything is available on our website. And we're always happy to answer questions. Thank you very much for joining me. If you would like to buy anything you've tasted this evening, it's all on our website, www.pinkstergin.com. We are, I think, having a live Q&A session after this. The details, again, available on our Facebook page. I hope that you've enjoyed it. And as much as I have, thank you for joining me.